The sea was invisible, but everyone in the glider could hear it. Wind hammered the fabric-covered wings and rattled the wooden frame as the Waco CG-4A bucked behind its C-47 tow plane. Inside, British infantrymen sat shoulder to shoulder on the narrow benches, their knees bumping the metal tubes that formed the fuselage. The red interior light turned their faces the color of dried blood. Helmets knocked together every time the glider dropped. Somewhere below, beyond the black rectangle of the floor, was the Mediterranean, and they could feel, more than see, how close it was. A sergeant near the front peered past the pilot toward the tiny windscreen. There was nothing out there but darkness, the faint glow of the tow plane's exhaust, and the occasional burst of flak. They had been in the air for hours. This was supposed to be the last leg, the run-in to Sicily, where they were to land near a bridge south of Syracuse, seize it before the Italians could destroy it, and hold until the seaborne forces came ashore. Instead, the glider was being thrown around like an empty crate. The mission was part of Operation Husky in July 1943. To support the landings by the British Eighth Army, planners wanted a surprise strike deep inland. The British 1st Air Landing Brigade would ride in on nearly 150 gliders, landing close to their objectives in a single silent wave. It was the first time the Allies had tried an airborne glider assault of this scale. The doctrine looked clean on paper, but almost everything that could go wrong did. In the weeks before the invasion, glider pilots and infantry trained in North Africa. They practiced loading jeeps, anti-tank guns, and medical teams into the cramped fuselages, rehearsed exits, and studied sand table models of the Sicilian coastline. Many pilots had limited experience flying the Waco. Night operations with full combat loads had barely been tested. Senior airborne commanders pushed for a dawn landing instead of a night assault, but the request was denied. Surprise took priority. On the evening of July 9th, 1943, the plan moved from rehearsals to reality. At Tunisian airfields, more than 2,000 men climbed into 144 gliders, most of them American-built Wacos, a handful larger horses. Tow planes taxied through dust that hung like smoke in the floodlights. At around 6 o'clock, the first wave lifted off, gliders snapping taut on their tow lines as C-47s heaved them into the air. By twilight, long chains of aircraft stretched out over the dark water. The route to Sicily was long for a glider. Almost immediately, the formations ran into winds stronger than predicted. Gusts slammed into the wide wings and yanked at the tow ropes. C-47 pilots struggled to maintain position. Gliders began to swing, dragging their tugs out of formation. Load shifts forced some to turn back before they'd even cleared Africa. As the armada neared Sicily, the weather worsened. Clouds and haze hid both horizon and coastline. Searchlights and anti-aircraft guns reached up from the island. To avoid the fire, tow planes climbed or banked sharply, breaking whatever formation still remained. Some pilots lost track of the pathfinders marking the release point. Others lost track of the coast entirely. Mistakes followed fast. Some tow pilots, rattled by flak and convinced they were closer to land than they truly were, released early. Others had tow ropes severed by bursts of gunfire or snapped by the strain of evasive turns. Dozens of gliders slipped loose while still miles out over open sea. Inside one of those gliders, the men felt the sudden jerk as the rope fell away. The roar of the tug's engines faded, replaced by a steady rising whistle of air over the wings. The pilot pushed the nose down, trusting his instruments, searching for any trace of shore. None appeared. Only darkness. A minute passed. Then the sea rose like a wall. The impact tore the glider apart. Soldiers were hurled forward. Cold Mediterranean water surged in. Equipment that had been strapped down broke loose and slammed into men struggling to reach the exits. The glider sank almost immediately. Those closest to openings forced their way out and kicked upward, shedding gear as they fought for the surface. Others never escaped the tangled wreckage. Across the approach path to Sicily, the same disaster repeated. Gliders plunged into the sea, broke apart, and vanished. Many men were weighed down by radios, rifles, and ammunition. Some did not know how to swim. Life vests were not always worn correctly. Rescue boats were miles away. Nearly half the gliders never reached land, and well over 200 men drowned long before seeing Sicily's shore. The gliders that stayed attached faced their own chaos. Many overshot their designated landing zones, ending up miles off target. Others came in too fast, striking stone walls, irrigation ditches, or olive groves. A few cracked open on landing and maimed the men inside. Out of nearly 150 gliders launched, only a small fraction landed anywhere near where they were intended. Yet a handful succeeded. One Horsa glider, carrying men from the Staffordshire Regiment under Lieutenant Withers, landed close enough to the Ponte Grande Bridge to continue the mission. Withers and his platoon advanced on foot, swimming part of a river to surprise the defenders. They captured the bridge, cut away demolition charges, and held through the night against repeated counterattacks. They ran out of ammunition by morning, but not before holding long enough for the Eighth Army to reach the objective and secure it intact. At sea, sailors aboard the invasion fleet saw gliders crashing into the water, but had little sense of the scale of the disaster. Some ships launched boats to rescue survivors when possible. Men pulled from the sea were exhausted, shaking, and stunned into silence. Their mission had been to seize inland ground. Instead, they had fought just to keep their heads above water. By dawn on July 10th, British infantry were landing on the beaches south of Syracuse. Inland, scattered airborne troops still fought in small pockets, trying to link up or hold what they could. The men at Ponte Grande, after hours under fire, were finally overrun. When British infantry reached them later that morning, the bridge was still intact. The ultimate objective had been achieved, though at a cost far greater than the planners had imagined. Casualty lists grew in the days that followed. More than 300 men from the 1st Air Landing Brigade were dead or missing, most lost at sea. 5 of the 6 gliders carrying the brigade's medical personnel never reached land. Commanders studying the disaster pointed to weather miscalculations, lack of night flying training, poor communication with naval forces, and the decision to insist on a night assault despite clear warnings. For survivors, none of the official analysis captured what mattered. They remembered the jolt when the rope snapped, the moment the floor tilted, the rush of freezing water, and the faces of men who never surfaced again. They had trained to land in silence on Sicilian soil. Instead, many of them died in the dark sea before the battle even began. Operation Husky ultimately succeeded, but the glider catastrophe forced the Allies to rethink airborne operations. Later missions would still be dangerous, but Sicily had exposed the gaps in training and coordination with brutal clarity. In the night sky on July 9, 1943, none of that mattered to the men riding in those gliders. All they knew was the wind, the sudden quiet when the tow rope fell away, and the black water surging toward them faster than they could react. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.